So what I've noticed in this work is that those uncomfortable experiences are like a knock on your door. It's a lesson knocking. I personally have never seen that lesson just stop knocking if you don't show up to it and you don't learn from it. It will just knock louder and louder and louder. So listen, if avoidance was a useful, sustainable approach, I would sell it to my clients all day long. If any of that stuff worked, I'd be on board to do it. The problem is that it works momentarily, and then it leaves you with a whole world of consequence that you have to clean up after. So avoidance is not a sustainable way to manage your feelings and show up to your relationship to yourself. Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it. And let's do it together. Welcome back to Grow with Robin Breckenridge. Today's going to be my first true solo episode where I am going to just talk to you about a topic, give you some information and tools, and give you something to walk away with today. However, I do have a special guest in my office who will probably not be making, or hopefully won't be making, an appearance, but I have my new rescue cat, Sunny, that I got last week. And I am a first-time adult cat owner. So if anybody has any good cat advice, I would love some. I'm learning as I go right now. But he is lovely and so sweet and amazing. And someone sent me a little meme on Instagram that basically said, stray cats find you for a reason, and that they come to bring something into your life. So he was a stray cat from the streets of Detroit, and he is so loving, and he has now become a little life coach cat. He sits in my office with me, so he's here for this episode. So I'm hoping his little majestic energy rubs off in this session. But this podcast I have designed to be a scaffolded build of tools and information that is necessary for you to live a more aligned life. So today in this episode, we're going to start with the foundational basics of what is needed to have a healthy relationship with yourself and others. And that starts with self-connection. So today we're diving into something that really is the foundation of everything. Your connection to yourself. So if you have ever struggled with self-trust, if you've ever felt lost in your own life, if you've spent years or decades prioritizing other people and not even really knowing what you need anymore, or if you're just human, if you're a human being, this episode is for you. So it's true that your relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship that you have. I know it's cliche, you have to love yourself to love other people, but man, it's true. So what happens if that lays a foundation for every other relationship we have, but our relationship with ourselves is disconnected, neglected, and built on a foundation of self-doubt? And that's what we're exploring today. What self-connection really is, why it's essential, why it's the core of everything that you want in your life, and how to start strengthening it today. So like I said, self-connection is the foundation of everything that you want in your life. It helps with emotional regulation, self-trust, having healthy relationships, being a conscious parent, and so much more. It's about leaning into knowing who you are, what you need, and what feels aligned for you. It's also about getting curious with yourself instead of being judgmental, and tuning into yourself before looking outward for validation from other people or permission or direction. If self-care is about meeting your needs, then self-connection is about knowing what those needs even are. And for a lot of us, that is really hard. So I was going to start with kind of giving you guys some self-care tools, but I really wanted to rewind it even further back. I mean, that's why I've been very intentional about how these episodes will be aligned in sequence and the approach, because I want every single episode to be like a stair going up a staircase back to yourself. So I wanted to start with the absolute basics of like just how you are in connection with yourself. So I give this example a lot because it's easy to see how we feel in relationship with other people. If you were in a relationship with someone and very rarely did you ever even ask, hey, how are you? Hey, I know you're going through something tough. How are you feeling about this? What do you need? What's going on? And again, just even the basics of checking in with that person. Would you feel deeply connected in relationship with that person? If something horrible happened in your life, would you go to that person to help you? No, they don't even really even know you. And they don't even take the time to get to know you or really even inquire about your emotional well-being. So that is true in our relationship with ourselves. So often we don't even slow down enough to say, hey, how are you? What's going on? How are you feeling? What are you going through? So you can imagine that we can throw self-care at you and boundaries and all of the wonderful tools that help build a more aligned life. But if you are not even in connection with yourself, that's why we go to, retreat weekends, or we read a book, or we listen to a podcast and we go, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. And then nothing changes. We have to start at the very root of this, which is that without a connection to yourself, your life you'll repeat the same patterns. So today we are going to start focusing and prioritizing your relationship to yourself so that I can throw all these other amazing tools at you and they stick. So awareness is the first step in behavioral change. So let's talk about the signs that you can recognize that mean you're disconnected from yourself. So 1, you struggle to know what you actually want. 2, you feel numb, detached, or constantly drained. 3, you second guess yourself, overthink, or always seek outside reassurance. 4, you feel lost or like life is happening to you. 5, you don't trust your own instincts or decisions. So talking about self-trust is one of those things that I think we are all like, oh yeah, I know what that means, but what does that really mean? So I'm going to explain it because ad nauseum, I love to explain everything to its most simplest form, because I think that emotional work is complex, and why not just make it as simplified as we can? So here are some signs that you might be struggling with self-trust. Saying yes to things that you don't want to do. Having a lot of like overthinking in every decision because you're afraid to make the wrong choice. Asking multiple people for advice before making a decision instead of trusting your own judgment. Feeling guilty after setting a boundary and either thinking that you're too much or maybe the boundary was too much. Ignoring your gut or your intuition and then realizing later that you should have listened to yourself. So I have a couple things to say on that list. One is that I don't believe in right or wrong decision making. I believe that there is only aligned or not aligned choices. Now, that can be complex when we don't have a connected relationship with ourselves because we don't really know what's aligned or not aligned. That's what I'm here for. That's what this podcast is here for. But let's just say that we make a choice in our life that ends up not being exactly what we wanted it to be. My approach to that is that you just make a promise to yourself, an agreement with yourself that you will learn from everything. Then if something that comes in that looks like a wrong choice happens, we can look at that and get the information from it. We can pull learning from it, which means that it was never wrong to begin with. It means that that experience was supposed to come into our life to teach us something or help our nervous system have the capacity for something better that's coming into our life, something else. So there really is no right or wrong choice. There's just an aligned choice or not an aligned choice and learning. Also, when we are asking a lot of different people for their advice or feedback on something, I call that having too many cooks in the kitchen, because truly what we go to other people for is not so that we're influenced by their opinion. It's actually we're asking their opinion to bring us closer to our own truth. But what happens is when we invite a lot of people's opinions in something that has some vulnerability around it for us, and we have one person going, "Oh my God, you should leave that relationship or that job. Like, of course you should." And the other person says, "Oh my God, are you crazy? You need to stay. What are you thinking?" And we have all these different opinions. What ends up happening is what we went for was to have their feedback help us align closer to our truth, but we end up farther away from our truth and more confused. So all of this, even when we're asking other people's advice, is to bring us to a closer connected relationship with ourselves and our truth. But what ends up happening is if we're not really connected to ourselves, then we're just flooded with other people's opinions and how they would do something. So it ultimately ends up not being very helpful. So I'm going to tell you guys a personal story about a time in my life when I was just a complete yes person. And the reason that I was a yes person was because I didn't know how to manage guilt. And I have a history of being the youngest person in my family by a decent amount. So I didn't really have like a lot of say growing up. I just kind of had to go along with things. That's just how it went for me. So I didn't really have a lot of tools to be able to disappoint people, to say no, to prioritize my needs and know, that was just as important as the needs of other people. So I said yes to everything. And so often I was completely overcommitted. Because I was showing up to everything that everybody else wanted from me, I really didn't have a lot of time and energy to give back to myself. So along that journey, I found a quote. And it's a quote that I'll probably share multiple more times on this podcast, but it's that good. And repetition is the mother of learning. So if we hear things more than one time, it's not a bad thing when it comes to this work. But the quote is from a spiritual teacher named Byron Katie. And it says, "A dishonest yes is a no to self." And what that means is that when we say yes to something that's not aligned with our truth, we are essentially neglecting and abandoning ourselves. And I've been doing this work long enough where I get the privilege of watching other people's lives and the consequences that follow, and then paying attention to my own life. I can confidently say now that there is a consequence every single time we neglect and abandon ourselves. Now, I know I could do a million breakout episodes on so many little things that I'm saying here, like what is self-abandonment and what is self-neglect, which I'm happy to do in the future. But in the interest of time right now, that's what it means. When we do not listen to ourselves and we override our truth, there's always a consequence to that. So that person, that part of me that was a yes person, I started asking myself that question, that I would repeat that quote. I mean, almost to nauseum of like anytime I would agree to something. Is this an authentic yes? And in the beginning, it was a little bit hard, a little bit confusing, where like that voice would come in and say, oh, well, oh my God, it's only an hour of your time. It's not the end of the world. And so it would be like a little confusing, but I'd ask myself again, like, is this an authentic yes? Is this something I really want to do? And very often it wasn't. Very often I was saying yes out of fear of upsetting someone or being rejected. I was saying yes out of guilt, which is essentially fear. Again, for those same reasons. And so again, I'm going to teach you guys a lot about boundaries. I'm not expecting anybody to listen to this podcast and go out in the world and say no to everything. But from an awareness perspective, that is a really great vetting question to ask yourself. Is this an authentic yes? And there was a period of time where I would say, no, it's not an authentic yes. And I would do it anyways. And I would see the resentment and the eye rolls or the, scoffing under my breath at going to something or doing something. So I want you guys to just pay attention to that. That was a huge, helpful tool and vetting question for me to lean into connection with myself. Like, hey, before I even agree to something, do I even want to do this? Why am I even saying yes to this? Again, that is just basic self-connection and will make such a huge difference in your life. Here's the thing. Self-connection doesn't come naturally for a lot of us. We have been conditioned to disconnect from ourselves. And there's so many reasons for that. Society, your environment growing up. Also, if you've experienced any trauma, which most of us have experienced, even just relational trauma, which means that we didn't get something we needed growing up emotionally. When we experience trauma, the way that we manage it usually means that we disconnect it from ourselves. So for all of us on this journey, all of you guys listening to this podcast and every client that's ever come through my door, this is the journey back home. It requires us to emotionally attune to ourselves, to be able to manage and tolerate our feelings so that we can get the need that the feeling is communicating, because that's really what feelings are. We have this super intelligent, complex system in us called a nervous system. And it's a threat detector, and its job is to keep us safe and alive. And it does its job really well, but it alerts us through feelings and emotional experiences and discomfort to let us know what's aligned and what's not aligned, what's a threat and what's not a threat. So our nervous system will communicate often through feelings. So I can give you guys an example. Anger, for instance, is a communication from our nervous system that a boundary has been crossed and that there is a threat to something. And so it is alerting us to protect ourselves, to keep ourselves safe. Now, if we don't understand that that is a communication system telling us, hey, there's a need here, and I'm communicating it through this emotional experience you're having, then it just gets in the way. So anger is complex. There is a positive and negative side to anger. The negative side of anger is that it is rage and it's destructive and violent. And the positive form of anger is that it's the most motivating energy on the planet. It'll motivate you to leave that job, to leave that relationship, to assert a boundary, to have that hard conversation. But either way, it's a message. It's a communication from this system we have in us that you have a need. And you have a need for protection or to get yourself back into alignment. So if we look at feelings as only this complication that we need to get rid of, we can't be in connection with ourselves and not be in connection with our feelings. So a big part of this is learning how to manage and tolerate your feelings in ways that don't harm you. But for so many of us, we have no idea really where to even start with self-connection. We might confuse it with self-care. Like, okay, I get my nails done, I go get a massage, I take a nap. But really self-connection means we are having a connected experience with ourselves or with parts of ourselves. So for so many of us, we've been taught to prioritize what other people think over how we feel. In social media, people pleasing, childhood conditioning, all of these play a role in pulling us away from our inner knowing. So the self-abandonment patterns of overcommitting, neglecting our needs, focusing on the needs of others, etc. These are all ways that, again, in micro versus macro ways, like there's macro ways that we don't connect to ourselves, and those are a lot easier to see. But there's micro mini ways throughout our day where we are disconnecting from ourselves. One example that I have is I remember, I love what I do. I've always been a motivated person in work. So I work a lot. I work a lot Monday through Friday. And what I would notice is that I would go throughout maybe the whole day and see clients. And then it would be about 7 o'clock at night and I would feed myself for the first time that day, unrelated to any type of eating disorder or issue like that. I just truly didn't make time to feed myself. And so I had this moment where I thought, gosh, okay, if I didn't feed my son, and he was younger at that time, if I didn't feed my son until 7 p.m. every day, what would that be? And then this voice said to me, well, that would be neglect. And probably in his case, I could have Child Protective Services step in. This kid isn't eating all day. He needs fuel in his body and energy. We need to eat. And so I thought to myself, holy smokes, I think I'm in self-neglect. And here I thought I was showing up to my job and doing these great things. And so I really looked at it like, not only am I not neglecting this adult version, not only am I neglecting this adult version of me, this little girl in me that experienced some level of neglect, I'm also just doing the same thing to her. I'm saying, hey, guess what? What you need comes last. Everybody else's needs come before yours. Even your basic needs come last, like eating. And it really was a great motivator for me to slow down and consider these little small acts of connecting with myself and taking care of myself. So now I implement breaks in my day. And those breaks, I don't just eat. Like there was times I would eat next to my computer, and while I was working, I disconnect from kind of the world. I watch a little show. I listen to a podcast. I do something that feels like I'm showing up for that part of myself, and I feed her and I'm present for it. So when I'm talking about self-connection, I can't ignore the component of your inner child in this, because what we're doing to the adult part of us, we are doing to that little kid. So if we're sending a message somehow, you don't matter, you come last, your needs are a burden, I don't have time for them. My guess is we could probably rewind back to that 5, 6, 10-year-old self. And what you are doing to yourself was done to you at that time by somebody else. Somehow that same messaging was going on when you were a kid. And we can't go back in time and give our inner children a different outcome to their childhood. For most of us, whatever was going on didn't stop. We didn't have this kind of person to ride up on a white horse and change the trajectory of our childhood. So for a lot of us, we can't go back and change that. But what we have the agency and choice to do now is we can change the ending to that story. Again, in micro and macro ways. When I first started doing this work for myself, I was really looking at the more macro, big ways that I was being destructive to myself or not showing up for myself. And over time, I was able to see, and I'm still seeing it because I'm human, all the little ways that I'm continuing the same things that were done to me, to myself. So just as simple as like not eating till 7 o'clock, which I understand intermittent fasting, and that's not what I was doing. But just things like that, where we go, wow, I'm kind of sending the message to myself and that inner child that like, I'm not even important enough to feed until 7 o'clock when I'm starving. And then I binge eat because I haven't eaten all day, which none of that is really kind to myself. So we have to talk about that inner child when we're talking about this being relevant to slow down and connect with yourself and show up for yourself. It's not just the adult you, it's that little kid version of you that energetically lives in you and goes everywhere and experiences everything you experience. Then maybe we're doing the same thing, obviously unconsciously, that was done to us or that we experienced at that time. And also, sometimes we avoid self connection because we just don't want to sit in the feelings. Again, you can't be connected to yourself and not connected to your feelings. So, when we don't know how to manage those tough feelings, it does feel like the best option is to get away from them. But unfortunately, if we avoid feelings, it doesn't make them go away. If you push it down, it comes out sideways somewhere in your life. And at least in my experience, what I've noticed is that these uncomfortable experiences we have, they're lessons, they're teachers. And I think ultimately everything we go into in life, all the experiences we have, is a way for us to more deeply know and connect with ourselves. When you go through hard things, you learn a lot about yourself if you're paying attention. So, what I've noticed in this work is that those uncomfortable experiences are like a knock on your door. It's a lesson knocking. I personally have never seen that lesson just stop knocking if you don't show up to it and you don't learn from it. It will just knock louder and louder and louder. So, listen, if avoidance was a useful, sustainable approach, I would sell it to my clients all day long. If any of that stuff worked, I'd be on board to do it. The problem is that it works momentarily and then it leaves you with a whole world of consequence that you have to clean up after. So avoidance is not a sustainable way to manage your feelings and show up to your relationship to yourself. Can't do it anymore. So the good news is having a foundation of self-connection can be rebuilt. You don't need a life overhaul to start. You just need to be intentional with your approach to connecting with yourself. So, in true life and relationship coach fashion, I'm going to give you a few actionable things that you can do this week to prioritize and bring some more self connection into your week. So the first one is pretty easy. It's a simple journal exercise that honestly, you can do it in the notes in your phone. You can put a journal next to your bed, but just start a journal and you can do this before you pick up your phone in the morning. You can do it at the end of the night. But all you have to do is write at the top of the page, "Hi, blank." I'll use myself as an example. "Hi, Robin. How are you today? What's going on today?" Question mark. And let yourself write. Now, obviously, all of this work, if I had each person listening individually, might look a little bit different. So I'm not going to blanketly say that that's an easy task for everybody listening. It might vary. Journaling, when we're in states of disconnection, when we are in avoidance of ourselves, can be a very tedious ask, even something as simple as, "Hi, how are you?" Because us not journaling has been one of the reasons it's been helpful. Like, we don't want to connect with our feelings that we don't know how to manage or certain realities in our life. So, for every single invitation that I give you guys, I'm always going to say there is a variance of how you can approach it. Obviously, on one far extreme, you do it and you get all kinds of positive benefit from it. From the other extreme, maybe you just get curious with it. Maybe you just start considering or you give it a shot. But with everything that you do, I want you to always get data on whether or not this is aligned for you, it works for you. But where I'd like you to start, if you're open to it, is just to start with the journal entry that says, "Hi, how are you? What's going on?" And allow your internal guidance or what's going on internally to just kind of flow out. And that is just our basic step. Like I gave you in the example earlier of like, how deep of a connection could we have with someone that we really don't even slow down enough to ask how they're doing or how they're doing with what's going on in their life. So let's start there. And let's build self connection through those little micro actions of maybe just starting a simple conversation with yourself. You can do it every day if you'd like. And if the best you have this week is once, give it a shot. The second invitation that I want to give is just to build awareness. This is obviously like the more we go into talking about this work, this might feel more aligned or relevant. But I want you to just start checking in with your body. Our nervous system doesn't lie to us. So obviously, there's a lot of nuances and understanding that communication, but it doesn't lie to us. So when we're working on self connection and self trust, one of the bigger parts of that is starting to listen to our body. Now, for some of you guys, you might not be living in your body. You might not even know what does check in with your body mean. I know for myself, there was a time when I went to a therapist and she asked me, "Where do you feel this in your body?" And I would just make something up because I didn't live in my body. And so I really didn't understand the question of like feeling it in my body. I was mostly living in my head and in my actions. So of course, if this invitation feels a little premature, just kind of use it as a seed that will go forth in future episodes to kind of give more understanding and context to that. But I want you to be aware that there is this thing in our body that tells us the truth all the time. Some of you might already feel it. Some of you that might feel pretty foreign, but I want you to just start getting curious to what your body can be communicating to you. Usually when we feel discomfort or anxiety or avoidance, it is our body trying to communicate some sort of need. So I want you guys just to build an awareness that there is this knowledge base in our body that is probably the most trustworthy thing that we have in this life. And so again, I will do my part in going into episodes in the future where we, land this concept a little bit more. But I wanted you to just start thinking about it. I have 4 invitations. The third invitation is that you get a picture of yourself as a kid. If this is not destabilizing to you, if any of this feels destabilizing to you, just listen to this and maybe we'll get to that point another time in your work, or maybe there's some work that you need to address first before stepping into this much action. So please know you don't fail if this feels like too much for you. I always want you to listen to yourself and what feels aligned in this work. But if it does, I'd like you to get a picture of yourself as a child and put it up somewhere that you can see. Because a lot of the relevance in taking care of ourselves and connecting to ourselves is realizing that that little kid needs us. So if we can start by just putting a picture up somewhere so that we start that connection, because not only are we connecting with ourselves, we're connecting with parts of ourselves too. And again, I'm going to go into that in greater detail in future episodes. And then the last invitation that I have is again somewhere on the spectrum of either just getting curious with it or stepping into action with it, is to pay attention to how you're talking to yourself. That is a really important piece around self-trust. If you guys came to this podcast every week looking to be uplifted and all I did was put you down and compare you to others and tell you how horrible or how screwed you were in your life, I don't think you'd want to come back here. So remember that we have a biosphere that we're living in. And if there's a loudspeaker that is super critical and probably for some of us abusive, doesn't it make a lot of sense that we would want to get out of that biosphere as often as we could? Maybe that looks like mindlessly scrolling. Maybe that looks like smoking weed. Maybe that looks like drinking. Maybe that looks like losing yourself in another relationship. But it all kind of makes sense if we realize that the environment that we're living in is abusive, toxic, and not nice. So again, I'll go into all of these in greater detail in further episodes, but I do want you to pay attention to how you're speaking to yourself. And then to relate it to just the last invitation I just gave, also be aware that you are talking to that little kid too. And when we are in states of activation, our wounded parts are up, alert, and aware of what is going on. And so a lot of the time when we feel scared, when we feel overwhelmed, it is a younger part of us that didn't get the resources or the tools to help yourself through it. So just keep in mind that when we are speaking to ourselves, we are speaking to all parts of ourselves. And for those of us that maybe experienced verbal abuse, physical abuse, criticism growing up, like we've had enough of it. And now it's time to look at what's going on in the environment, aka the body that we live in. So those are my 4 invitations for you to take into your week this week. So here's a few reflective questions that you can ask yourself. When was the last time I truly checked in with myself? Where do I see that I am neglecting myself in my life? Remember those micro or macro, like I was looking at it and just not feeding myself throughout the day. But maybe there's some bigger, more overt ways that you see that you're not showing up and that you might be neglecting yourself, but look for it. Where do I see some self-neglect in my life? And then what is one way I can show up and connect with myself this week? There's an amazing concept in this work. It's so simple, but also so complex, which is just do it differently. So there's a lot of places in your life, if the way that you're showing up isn't working, or it's not feeling purpose driven, it's not helping to create the life that you want, then it's worth trying to do it slightly different and getting the data. So I want you to just look at this week. Last week I would have normally shown up this way, and this week I'm going to do it different. And at the very least, if anything you pull out of this episode, just try to do one thing slightly different and more towards loving yourself. That's it. That's how simple we can start it. Okay, so here's a few key takeaways from this episode. 1, you can't build self-trust without self-connection. 2, small, consistent, micro moments of self-connection can lead to bigger shifts in your life. And 3, the more you get curious with yourself, the closer we are getting to clarity in your internal knowing. So this week, commit to one moment of self-connection. You can do it daily. You can do it just once this week. Notice how it feels to pause and listen and honor what's coming up for you and where you are. Next time, we're going to dive into self-care and integrating self-care and self-connection to create a healthier relationship with ourselves in a sustainable way. We're going to talk about actionable goals and intentions that you can take into your week. So if this episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. I truly believe that just as much as darkness is contagious, so is light and consciousness. The main reason that I am doing this podcast is just to touch as many people as I can with tools and information that has helped my life and the people that I work with. So if there's anybody that you know would benefit, I truly am so grateful for you to have them to share this information with them. And remember that your relationship with yourself is the foundation for everything that you want in this life. It is a beautiful investment of your time and money to go more inward with yourself. So I will see you next time, and take care of yourself. You deserve it. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation, especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.